This Speak Up Construction Safety video is brought to you by the Construction Safety Research Center. 3 facts were determined as the focus for this program. The Hispanic population represents a crucial segment of the U.S. construction workforce. Unfortunately, the data suggests that Hispanic workers face higher rates of fatal and non-fatal injuries. Construction firms consist of a group of people who communicate daily, and this communication is vital to maintaining overall site safety. The objective for this program is to illustrate the value of two-way communication on a typical construction site, using a potentially dangerous situation and 3 possible outcomes. Steve, a foreman at Atlas Roofing, arrives at a residential house to complete several final details with Carlos, a new roofing trainee. Steve wants to wrap up these details quickly so that Atlas can collect their final payment. He plans for Carlos to work independently on 2 stack vents while he is completing other items on their checklist. Steve assumes that Carlos has been thoroughly trained on safety procedures by the Atlas superintendent. Steve tells Carlos that the materials are on the truck. Grab a roof anchor to use at the peak and get started. Carlos nods and heads to the truck. He knows that Steve hates it when a person wastes time before a job standing around talking. Later, on the roof, Carlos worries that he may not work fast enough because he is new and still learning. He decides that it will save a lot of time if he ties his harness around the chimney nearby instead of installing and removing the roof anchor. When Steve comes by to check on the job, he yells at Carlos for taking a shortcut on safety that could cause serious injury or worse. This tie-off to a rope around the chimney is not safe and gave Carlos a false sense of security. Steve tells Carlos that if he is unsure about what to do, he must speak up, especially in jobs like this that are very dangerous. Carlos worries that he may not have his harness on correctly. He is holding the lanyard strap and is unsure which end is to be attached to the lifeline, so he asks Steve about it. Steve explains that the end with the shock-absorbing section goes on his back, and the other end attaches to the lifeline and the anchor. He adds that in case of a fall, the force will pull it open to relieve some of the shock of the fall from injuring his body. Steve asks Carlos if he went over the fall protection safety equipment in his training. Carlos replies that yes, he did, but with Steve's explanation, he now understands the purpose of the harness design much better. Steve thanks Carlos and says he appreciates working with trainees like Carlos that speak up right away, so that together they can get things done correctly and safely. Steve asks Carlos to walk over to the truck with him while they talk over the job details. He shows him the 2 stack vent boots, flashing supplies, and the anchor to use. He tells him to carefully install the anchor at a location on the peak between the 2 stack vents. He reminds Carlos to tie off properly because accidents can easily happen when people are in a hurry. When he is finished, he asks Carlos to repeat his instructions to make sure they're on the same page. Carlos repeats Steve's instructions slowly, step by step, because English is his second language, and Steve responds by saying "muy bien" in his best Spanish. When Carlos is installing the flashing around the vent stack, he thinks how glad he is that Steve took the time to communicate clearly about how to handle the details and asked him to confirm them, because sometimes he has had difficulty understanding what other foremen were asking him to do. A few minutes later, Steve comes by to answer any new questions that may have come up. The conclusions and observations for emphasis are: improving communication to reduce injuries is everyone's responsibility. Frontline supervisors are the first line of defense against injuries. Frontline supervisors must do their best to improve communication. Outcome A. No one speaks up. Here there is a high probability for a safety incident. Outcome B. The worker speaks up. Here the assumptions regarding safety are questioned and communication is improved. Outcome C. The foreman speaks up. Here, two-way communication is strengthened and safety is improved.